The air in the hidden chamber was thick with the scent of smoke and damp stone, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the rough walls. Aveline knelt by the battered wooden chest she had discovered beneath the floorboards of the abandoned manor house, her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a cache of parchments, bound by crimson ribbons and stamped with the unmistakable seal of Baron de Clermont. Her heart pounded as she carefully untied the ribbons and spread the papers before her. The elegant script detailed the noble's plan, a swift, brutal assault designed to crush the rebellion once and for all. Jack stood silently behind her, his lean frame tense, eyes darting between the documents and Aveline's face. "This is worse than we feared," he muttered, voice low. "They intend to strike before winter, when our numbers are still growing, but our supplies are thin." Aveline's grey eyes narrowed, absorbing every line, every notation of troop movements and siege tactics. The plan was ruthless mercenaries to be hired, villages to be burned, and a final strike aimed directly at the heart of their stronghold. The weight of the revelation pressed down on her like the heavy anvil she worked at the forge, but beneath the crushing news was a spark of hope. Knowledge was power. "We must warn the others," she said, standing abruptly, the candlelight catching the soot smudged across her face. "If we prepare, we might stand a chance." The journey back to the rebel camp was fraught with a new urgency. Aveline and Jax moved swiftly through the dense forest, wary of spies and patrols. Upon arrival, the camp buzzed with activity, but the usual hum of hope was tinged with tension. Aveline called a gathering of her closest allies beneath the flickering flames of a bonfire, the night sky a vault of stars overhead. As she unfurled the stolen documents on a rough-hewn table, murmurs rippled through the crowd. Aliz's fiery eyes met Aveline's, reflecting both fear and determination. Lady Margaret stood quietly at the edge, her noble bearing undiminished despite the dangers she faced by associating with rebels. "The Baron intends to attack soon," Aveline announced, voice steady despite the storm inside her. "We have little time to prepare. We must fortify our defenses, train harder, and be ready to face what comes." Jack stepped forward, outlining the tactical advantages they could exploit. "The terrain favors us if we use it wisely. We can set traps, ambush points, but we must also protect the villages. The people are our strength." Lady Margaret's voice broke the heavy silence. "I will do what I can within the court. The Baron's men are not invincible. There are those who question his harsh methods. If I can sow discord or delay his plans, it will buy you precious time." Aveline regarded the noblewoman with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. Trust was a fragile thing, yet in this moment, their shared cause bound them. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. The forge blazed day and night, steel clashing as weapons were crafted with a newfound urgency. Marcel, the eager apprentice, worked tirelessly, his youthful energy a beacon amidst the looming darkness. Aliz's speeches inspired the villagers to stand firm, her voice ringing out across the fields like a clarion call. But beneath the surface, doubts gnawed at Aveline. Each decision bore weight, each sacrifice a potential loss. Memories of fallen comrades haunted her nights, and the pressure of leadership pressed heavily on her shoulders. Yet, she found strength in the solidarity of those around her, the fierce loyalty of Jax, the unwavering resolve of Elise, and even the unexpected aid of Lady Margaret. One dawn, Aveline stood atop a ridge overlooking the village, the chill wind tugging at her dark hair. The first light of morning broke through heavy clouds, casting a pale glow over the land she had sworn to protect. In her hands, she held the ceremonial crown forged from the very steel that had armed their rebellion, a symbol of the hope and resilience they carried into the uncertain days ahead. Her gaze shifted to the horizon, where the faintest stirrings of the Baron's forces would soon appear. The coming battle was more than a fight for survival. It was a clash of ideals, a test of the human spirit against oppression. "We will not be broken," she whispered to the wind, her voice carrying the promise of fire and steel. We fight for freedom, for justice, for a future forged in courage. As the camp stirred awake, readying for what was to come, the shadow of war loomed large. Secrets had been revealed, and with them, the fragile hope of rebellion was tempered by the stark reality of sacrifice. In the heart of medieval France, beneath the weight of crowns and blades, Aveline prepared to lead her people into the storm. The forge's flames flickered in the distance, a beacon of defiance against the gathering darkness. The blacksmith queen was ready to face her destiny. And so the stage was set. The noble forces would soon march, but the fire of rebellion, kindled in the heart of a blacksmith's daughter, burned brighter than ever. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale glow across the war-torn valley. Aveline stood at the head of the rebel ranks, her gaze fixed upon the towering stone battlements of the noble stronghold that loomed ahead like a dark monolith against the morning sky. The air was thick with anticipation, a charged silence broken only by the soft murmurings of whispered prayers and the distant crowing of roosters heralding the new day. Around her, the faces of the peasants, men and women alike, were smeared with soot and streaked with grime from long nights spent preparing for this moment. Their eyes burned with fierce determination, a fire kindled by years of suffering and the unyielding hope for freedom. The clang of steel from the blacksmiths, forges where weapons had been tirelessly crafted, mixed with the rustling of leather and the tightening of straps as the rebels readied themselves for the assault. Jax moved swiftly beside Aveline, his lean frame tense yet steady. "The catapults are ready," he reported in a low voice, eyes scanning the horizon for signs of enemy movement. "Our archers are positioned, but the walls are heavily guarded. We must strike quickly before their reinforcements arrive." Aveline nodded, her hands tightening around the haft of her newly forged spear. "Then we give them no quarter. Today we show them the strength of the people and the steel of our resolve." The first thunderous boom shattered the quiet as the rebel catapults launched their heavy stones, sending clouds of dust and debris erupting against the outer walls. The sound was deafening, a grim herald of the violence to come. From the battlements, Baron de Clermont's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, as his knights rallied to defend their fortress with ruthless efficiency. Smoke curled into the sky, mingling with the acrid scent of burning wood and the coppery tang of blood. Aveline's heart pounded in her chest as she led the charge, the ground trembling beneath the pounding of hooves and the thunder of war cries. The clash of steel rang out as rebels met knights in fierce combat, the battlefield a swirling maelstrom of chaos and courage. Amid the fray, Elise darted through the smoke, her fiery red hair a vivid banner amid the grey haze. She delivered urgent commands and bolstered the spirits of the wary fighters with impassioned cries that cut through the din like a clarion call. "Hold the line! For freedom! For our future!" The rebels pressed forward, their makeshift weapons and homemade armor no match for the polished steel of the noble knights. Yet their spirit was indomitable. Aveline's spear found its mark again and again, her movements a blend of precision and ferocity honed at the forge and tempered on the battlefield. Beside her Jax's arrows flew true, each shaft a silent messenger of defiance. But the cost was steep. Men and women fell, their cries echoing across the battleground, mingling with the harsh commands of officers and the grinding of siege engines. The rebel banners, frayed and bloodied, still flew defiantly, symbols of hope against the oppressive shadow of the old order. High above, Baron de Clermont's cold blue eyes watched the unfolding battle, his scarred face a mask of unyielding resolve. Clad in gleaming armor, he moved with the grace and deadly intent of a seasoned warrior, cutting down those who dared breach the walls with ruthless efficiency. The clash between him and Aveline was inevitable, a collision of ideals and steel that would decide the fate of the rebellion. As the sun climbed higher, the battle raged on, a relentless storm of fury and sacrifice. Aveline's voice rose above the tumult, rallying her followers with shouts of encouragement and orders. Push forward. For the people!
For justice!
The rebels surged, breaking through the outer defenses, their cheers mingling with the cries of the wounded and the clash of combat. Yet even as victory seemed within reach, the brutal reality of war weighed heavily on Aveline's heart. Every fallen comrade was a reminder of the price of freedom, every scar a testament to the struggle yet to come. In the thick of the fight, Aveline caught sight of Jax, his face grim but unwavering as he fended off a charge of armored knights. Elise appeared beside her, breathless but resolute, shouting, "The southern gate is weakening. We can break through there!" Seizing the moment, Aveline rallied her forces for a final push, the clang of steel and the roar of battle swelling to a fevered pitch. The rebellion's dream hung in the balance, forged in fire and blood, tested in the crucible of war. As the rebels stormed the gate, on Aveline's piercing gaze locked on the formidable walls, the promise of confrontation with Baron de Clermont burning bright in her mind. The siege had begun, and with it, the fate of a people yearning for freedom. The skies over the noble stronghold hung heavy and grey, a low rumble of thunder echoing the turmoil below. The once proud banners of Baron de Clermont fluttered desperately in the wind, battered and torn like the very order they represented. In the heart of the battlefield, where the fate of rebellion and tyranny would be decided, Aveline stood poised, her hands steady on the hilt of her sword, her breath steady despite the cacophony of war around her. She had come far from the forge where her hands had first learned the language of steel. Now, as the blacksmith queen, she bore not only a weapon, but the hopes of countless peasants who had suffered under the crushing weight of noble oppression. Her eyes, sharp and grey beneath the shadow of her hood, scanned the figure before her, Baron de Clermont. Tall, imposing, his polished armor glinted even in the dull light, his cold blue eyes fixed on her with a mixture of contempt and reluctant respect. The Baron's scarred face was a map of battles past, a testament to a life lived enforcing the rigid hierarchy of the old order. He raised his sword, the blade singing through the air with deadly intent. Aveline met his strike with her own, the clash of steel ringing out like thunder, momentarily drowning the distant cries of their armies. Around them, the battlefield was chaos, men and women fighting with desperate fury, the ground churned by hooves and blood. Their duel was more than a fight. It was a collision of worlds. Each strike carried the weight of centuries, the Baron's desire to preserve a world ruled by bloodlines and privilege. Aveline's burning resolve to forge a new future from the ashes of oppression. Their swords danced, sparks flying as metal met metal, the rhythm of their battle echoing the heartbeat of the rebellion itself. Aveline's thoughts flickered to Jax, her steadfast friend, shouting commands to the rebels who held the line behind her. His voice was a lifeline, steady and sure amidst the chaos. Nearby, Elise's fiery speeches stirred the wary fighters, her words a balm and a beacon, reminding them why they fought. The cost had been too high, but surrender was a word Aveline had long cast aside. The Baron pressed forward, each movement a testament to his skill and years of experience. Yet beneath his calculated strikes, Aveline sensed something else: hesitation, doubt. The old order was cracking, its foundation weakened by the courage of those it sought to crush. With a sudden, fierce strike, she exploited a brief opening, her blade finding a gap in the Baron's defense. The clang of swords echoed sharply, a sound that seemed to still the very air. The Baron staggered, surprise flashing across his scarred face. For a fleeting moment, the battlefield fell away, leaving only the two of them, the old world and the new, locked in mortal combat. Aveline's heart pounded, not just with the exertion of battle, but with the weight of what this moment meant. Was this truly the turning point? Could a single victory shatter centuries of tyranny? Doubt whispered in the back of her mind, but she silenced it with the fierce clarity that had carried her this far. She pressed the attack, each movement precise, every strike a declaration. The Baron faltered again, and this time Aveline's blade found its mark. He fell to one knee, the fight draining from his eyes, replaced by a grudging respect. Around them, the rebel forces surged forward, invigorated by the sight of their leader's triumph. The noble soldiers wavered, their morale breaking like brittle glass. Yet even in victory, Aveline knew the road ahead was fraught with peril. The old order did not die easily. Breathing heavily, she lowered her sword, meeting the Baron's gaze. "This is not just my fight," she said, her voice steady despite the roar of war. "It is ours, the people's, and we will not be broken." The Baron nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of defeat and perhaps of change. The clash of titans had ended, but the forging of a new realm was just beginning. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over the battlefield scattered with fallen and victorious alike, Aveline felt the weight of the crown she would soon bear, a crown not of gold, but of steel and sacrifice. The struggle was far from over, but the flame of rebellion burned brighter than ever. With a final glance at the horizon, she turned to rally her people, the Blacksmith Queen, forged by fire and tempered by resolve, ready to lead her fractured land toward a future forged in justice and hope. The sky hung low and heavy, a dull canvas smeared with smoke and ash, as the battle raging across the fields near the noble stronghold reached a fevered pitch. The ground beneath was churned to mud, soaked with blood and sweat, the air thick with the acrid scent of burning wood and metal. From behind makeshift barricades of splintered timber and overturned carts, the rebel forces braced themselves, faces streaked with grime, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fierce resolve. The clamor of clashing steel and the sharp cries of combatants filled the air, a chaotic symphony underscoring the desperate struggle for freedom. Aveline stood atop a small rise overlooking the battlefield, her silhouette stark against the dimming light. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly, strands loose and damp with sweat, framing a face marked with soot and determination. Her piercing gray eyes scanned the fray, calculating, searching for the slightest weakness in the disciplined ranks of Baron de Clermont's knights. Around her, the murmurs of her commanders shifted to urgent whispers as the tide of battle began to shift perilously. "Jacques," she called softly, her voice steady despite the turmoil, "ready the archers for the signal. We flank at dusk. We must turn their strength against them." Jacques nodded, his lean frame tense but resolute. "They won't see it coming," he said, a flicker of grim humor in his weathered eyes. "Not if we move swift and silent." Elise approached, her red hair catching the last glow of sunlight, her green eyes alight with passion. "The people are watching, Aveline. Every move we make will inspire or break them. We cannot fail now." Aveline's lips pressed into a thin line. "We will not fail, not today." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a blood-red glow over the fields, the rebels shifted into position. From their hidden vantage, the archers nocked arrows, breath held tight, muscles coiled like springs. Aveline raised her hand, the signal clear and sharp. A sudden volley erupted, a deadly hail of arrows whistling through the air. The noble knights, caught unprepared by the flanking assault, faltered. Their disciplined formations wavered as arrows struck armor and flesh alike. Shouts of surprise and pain rang out, the once confident advance turning chaotic. Seizing the moment, Aveline led a charge with her fiercest fighters, steel flashing in the fading light. The rebels surged forward, their cries mingling with the clash of swords, the momentum swinging decisively in their favor. Yet amid the victory, the cost was painfully clear. Friends and comrades fell, their sacrifices carved into the soil like silent monuments. In the midst of the fray, Jacques fought with grim determination, his arrows finding marks with deadly precision, but haunted by memories of battles past. Elise moved among the wounded, her fiery spirit a balm to the weary and broken. Together, they embodied the resilience fueling the rebellion. As darkness embraced the battlefield, the sounds of combat slowly gave way to scattered cheers and sobs. Aveline stood among her battered but unbroken fighters, her heart heavy yet alight with hope. The tide had turned, but the war was far from over. We fight not just with steel, she whispered, voice thick with emotion, but with the fire in our souls. Tomorrow we forge our future anew. Her words hung in the night air, a beacon for those who dared to dream beyond the crown's shadow. The sun rose blood-red over the shattered battlements of the noble stronghold, casting long shadows over the broken walls and smouldering ruins that marked the end of an era. The air was thick with the acrid scent of smoke and the metallic tang of spilled blood, mingling with the cries of the wounded and the low murmur of exhausted voices. Aveline stood at the center of the battered courtyard, her soot-streaked face illuminated by the pale morning light, eyes sharp with a fierce resolve born of countless battles and bitter loss. Months of relentless siege and unyielding struggle had brought them here, to the heart of Baron de Clermont's domain. The rebellion, once a whisper in the forge and a secret in the village shadows, had grown into a storm that tore through the old order. The clang of steel and the roar of defiance had shattered the silence of oppression, and now, as the dust settled, the true weight of their victory pressed heavily upon them. The gates had fallen at dawn, breached by the combined might of peasants turned warriors, their crude weapons tempered by Aveline's masterful forging, and their spirits hardened by years of suffering. Jax had led the vanguard, his arrows darkening the sky like a deadly rain, cutting down the noble archers who sought to defend their crumbling fortress. Alyssa's voice had soared above the chaos, rallying the rebels with fiery cries that rekindled their courage even as the battle raged around them. Inside the great hall, the once grand chamber now lay in ruins. Broken banners hung limp from shattered rafters, stained with dust and blood. The ornate tapestries that told tales of noble lineage were torn and trampled, replaced by the scars of war. It was here that Aveline found Baron de Clermont, his imposing figure diminished, armor battered and dulled, his cold blue eyes now clouded with defeat and disbelief. Their confrontation was as much a meeting of souls as of swords. The Baron sneered, a bitter edge in his voice. "You, a blacksmith's daughter, dare to defy the crown and the laws that bind us all." Aveline's gaze did not waver. "It is not the crown that binds us, but chains forged by greed and cruelty. Today those chains are broken." Steel sang as their blades clashed, a fierce dance echoing the clash of old world and new. Each strike carried the weight of history, each parry a testament to the rebellion's unyielding spirit. But it was not just strength that decided the battle. It was the fire within Aveline's heart that could not be quenched. As the Baron fell, defeated but alive, the hall echoed with the silence of an ending. Around them, the rebels tended to the wounded, their faces etched with exhaustion and pain. Flames flickered from torches, casting long shadows that danced upon the broken stones, illuminating the harsh reality of victory. The cost had been steep. Friends lost, dreams shattered, but a new dawn had been born. Lady Margaret moved quietly among the survivors, her noble grace tempered by the grime of battle. Her conflicted loyalties had found resolution in this new world forged by fire and steel. Her whispered words of aid and encouragement were a balm to weary souls and a promise of fragile alliances to come. Jax stood beside Aveline, his weathered face softened by a rare smile. "We have won the battle, but the war for our people's future is just beginning." Aveline nodded, her piercing grey eyes reflecting the weight of her new crown, not one of gold, but of steel and sacrifice. "Then we must be ready, for the forging of peace will demand the same courage as the fight for freedom." As the first light of day broke over the horizon, the rebels gathered, their voices rising in a solemn hymn of remembrance and hope. The old order had fallen, but the story of the Blacksmith Queen was only beginning. The forge was silent for now, but the fires within would burn ever brighter, shaping a new destiny from the ashes of the past. And so, amid the ruins of a once mighty stronghold, a new realm was born, a realm where justice was hammered out in the heat of struggle. And the crown was worn not by birthright, but by the will of the people. The echoes of battle faded into a quiet resolve, as Aveline and her followers prepared to face the challenges that lay ahead, their hearts bound by the unbreakable steel of rebellion and hope. The night whispered promises of peace, but the dawn carried the unspoken truth. The fall of the old order was but the first step on a long and uncertain path. And in the heart of it all stood the Blacksmith Queen, forged by fire, ready to lead her people into a new age. The village square was transformed into a grand stage. Though it bore the scars of recent conflict, the earth still bore the footprints of marching feet and the remnants of hastily erected barricades. Torches flickered in the cool evening air, casting long shadows over the expectant crowd. Aveline stood at the heart of it all, her soot-streaked face illuminated by the golden glow. Her dark hair pulled back tightly to reveal the sharp line of her jaw, and the piercing grey eyes that had become a beacon of hope to so many. The ceremonial crown was unlike any the peasants had ever seen, forged from the very weapons that had been wielded in their fight for freedom. Twisted steel entwined with iron bands, gleaming with a fierce, unyielding light. As the blacksmiths and rebels gathered around, their hands steady despite the tremors of anticipation, the crown was lifted and lowered onto Aveline's head. The sound of metal meeting metal echoed through the square like a declaration, a new chapter forged in fire and resolve. A hush fell as the crown settled, then erupted into a roar of cheers, raw, unrefined, but filled with unshackable conviction. The clang of hammers striking anvils around the square began, a rhythmic anthem that spoke of endurance, of the fires that would never be extinguished. Aveline raised her hand, calling for silence. Her voice, steady and clear, carried through the night. Today we mark not just a victory over tyranny, but the birth of a new era. We are no longer bound by the chains of oppression. Together, we forge a future where justice is hammered out with courage and compassion. From the crowd, Jax watched her, his lean frame tensed, eyes sharp beneath a furrowed brow. The weight of what they had endured, the friends lost, the villages razed, pressed upon him as heavily as the sword at his side. Yet pride shone in his gaze, a fierce loyalty that had never wavered. He stepped forward as the crowd's cheers subsided, offering a steadying presence by Aveline's side. Eliz's voice rose next, carrying the fire of rebellion into the hearts of those who listened. She spoke of rights reclaimed, of voices once silenced now echoing through the valleys and fields. Her words painted visions of a society reborn, where women and men stood as equals in the fight for liberty and dignity. Her fiery red hair caught the torchlight, her bright green eyes alight with passion. The crowd responded with fervor, their spirits lifted by the promise of change. Amid the jubilation, a more subtle arrival was made. Lady Margaret approached the dais with measured steps, her noble attire contrasting with the ruggedness around her. Her face bore the marks of inner conflict, the elegance of her bearing softened by the sincerity in her eyes. She extended a hand toward Aveline, a gesture of alliance and reconciliation. "This crown," she said quietly, "is a symbol not only of rebellion, but of the possibility that even the old can change. The road ahead will not be easy, but perhaps together we can forge a peace worthy of this sacrifice." Aveline regarded her carefully, sensing both the risks and the opportunity in this fragile alliance. The cheers faded into the night, replaced by the steady rhythm of hammer on metal, the sound of a future still being forged. As the festivities waned, Aveline found a moment alone at the forge. The embers glowed softly, reflecting in her eyes like distant stars. The weight of the crown pressed not just on her head, but on her soul. She thought of the families who had lost everything, the friends who would never see this day, and the uncertain path that lay ahead. Yet beneath it all burned a fierce determination, a resolve tempered by every trial faced and every victory won. Her journey from the forge to the crown was complete, but the true test of her reign was only just beginning. The Blacksmith Queen was no longer just a symbol, she was a leader, a ruler, and a beacon for those who dared to dream of freedom. And in the quiet clatter of steel on anvil, The promise of a new world was hammered deep into the very heart of medieval France. "We have forged this moment from fire and blood," Aveline whispered to the night, "and we shall protect it with all that we are." The stars overhead seemed to burn a little brighter, as if in answer. The forge's flames flickered steady and strong, a beacon in the darkness, a crown of steel and hope. But even as joy swelled in the village, shadows lingered at the edges. Old rivalries simmered beneath the surface, and whispers of dissent could be heard among the ranks. The fragile peace would demand vigilance, and the sacrifices had not ended. The crown was heavy, but the blacksmith queen was ready to bear its weight. For the sake of her people, for the promise of justice, and for the future she would forge anew.